The peripheral nervous system, or PNS, is a critical part of the nervous system that connects to the central nervous system, the CNS. The PNS is divided into two main components, the somatic nervous system and the autonomic nervous system. The somatic nervous system is responsible for mediating voluntary motor functions and relaying sensory information from the body's external environment to the central nervous system. The primary function of this is to control skeletal muscles. It sends motor signals from the central nervous system to these muscles, allowing conscious and voluntary movements. When you decide to make peace symbols with your hand or give your boss the bird behind their back, it is the somatic nervous system that is responsible for controlling that movement. To understand this, we need to understand the motor pathway. Upper motor neurons and lower motor neurons are two distinct components of this pathway. Upper motor neurons are part of the central nervous system, whilst lower motor neurons, also known as LMNs, are situated in the peripheral nervous system. They are found in the anterior horn of the spinal cord and cranial nerve motor nuclei within the brainstem. LMNs directly connect to muscles and are the final common pathway for motor commands. They directly innervate and control the contraction of skeletal muscles. Damage to LMNs leads to muscle weakness, atrophy, and decreased muscle tone, often accompanied by fasciolations, which are muscle twitches, and hyperreflexia, which are diminished reflexes. LMNs are single neurons with cell bodies located in the spinal cord, the ventral horn, or specific cranial nerve motor nuclei. Each LMN innervates a specific muscle or group of muscles, controlling their contraction. Damage to LMNs, as seen in conditions like amyotrophic lateral sclerosis or spinal muscular atrophy, or even certain peripheral nerve disorders, leads to muscle weakness, atrophy, and loss of reflexes. Symptoms are typically localized to specific muscle groups, related to their specific dermatome. The somatic nervous system also includes sensory neurons that transmit information from sensory receptors in the skin, muscles, joints, and other body parts to the central nervous system. This sensory input allows one to perceive various sensations such as touch, temperature, pain, and proprioception, which is the awareness of body position and movement. This brings us neatly on to sensory modalities. Sensory modalities are the different ways in which one perceives and interprets sensory information from the external environment and within our bodies. These modalities represent distinct channels through which we experience the world. Visual modality, for example, is the perception of light, allowing one to see and interpret their surroundings. The eye captures visual information and sends it to the brain for processing. Hearing involves the perception of sound waves through the ear. It enables one to detect and interpret sounds from music to spoken language. This auditory information is processed by the auditory system in the brain. Taste, or gustation, is the ability to discern different flavors. Taste receptors on the tongue detect the presence of chemicals in food, which are then relayed to the brain for interpretation. The primary taste sensations include sweet, sour, bitter, salty, and umami, which means savory. Olfaction is the sense of smell, which allows us to detect and identify odors. The olfactory receptors in the nasal passage transmit information about scents to the brain for recognition and interpretation. Touch is the sensation of physical contact with objects and surfaces and includes various submodalities such as pressure, temperature, pain, and proprioception. Skin receptors play a crucial role in transmitting tactile information to the brain. Pain is the perception of tissue damage or injury. It serves as a warning signal to protect the body from harm. Specialized nociceptors detect noxious stimuli and transmit signals to the brain where the perception of pain occurs. The vestibular system, located in the inner ear, is responsible for detecting changes in head position and movement. It helps one maintain balance and spatial orientation. Thermal modality involves the perception of heat and cold sensations. Specialized thermoreceptors in the skin and deeper tissues detect temperature changes and transmit these signals. Proprioception is the perception of the body's position and movement in space. It relies on sensory receptors in muscles, tendons and joints to provide information about limb and body positions. This modality is crucial for coordinating motor activities. Mechanoreceptors in the skin and deep tissue are responsible for detecting pressure and vibration. These receptors play a role in tactile perception and proprioception. These signals are carried through nerve fibers. Nerve fibers can be classified into different types based on various properties, including their diameter, myelination, conduction velocity, and threshold for activation. Nerve fibers vary in diameter, and this influences their properties. Larger diameter fibers generally conduct impulses faster than smaller diameter fibers. Some nerve fibers are myelinated, meaning they are surrounded by a fatty myelin sheath that acts as an insulator. Myelin helps increase the speed of nerve signal conduction, whilst unmyelinated fibers lack this sheath and conduct impulses more slowly. Threshold refers to the minimum stimulus strength required to generate an action potential. Sensory nerve fibers have different thresholds for activation. Some respond to light touch, while others require a stronger stimulus to initiate a response. Whilst the somatic nervous system primarily handles voluntary movements, it can also be involved in reflex actions. Reflex arcs are rapid involuntary responses to stimuli that don't require conscious thought. For example, when you touch a hot object, your body may automatically withdraw your hand to prevent injury. Reflex arcs involve both sensory and motor components within the SNS. In the neural pathway, the receptor is the sensory structure that detects a stimulus or change in the environment. It can be a specialized sensory neuron or sensory organ, such as a stretch receptor in a muscle or pain receptor, nociceptor, in the skin. The receptor generates sensory input in response to the stimulus. The afferent neuron carries the sensory input from the receptor to the central nervous system, which includes the spinal cord and brain. This neuron transmits information about the stimulus to the CNS. The integration center is usually located within the spinal cord or brain. It consists of interneurons that process the sensory input and determine the appropriate response. In some cases, the brain may also be involved in processing this information. The efferent neuron carries motor commands from the integration center to the effector. The effector is typically a muscle or gland that carries out the reflex response. The effector is the target organ or tissue that carries out the reflex action. If the reflex is designed to produce a muscle contraction, the effector is a skeletal muscle. If the reflex is intended to produce a secretion or another response, the effector may be a gland or smooth muscle. The response is the specific action or behavior produced by the effector in reaction to the stimulus. This action is typically designed to counteract or mitigate the effect of the original stimulus. Synapses are the junctions between neurons where the transmissions of signals occurs. Information is transferred from the afferent neuron to the interneurons in the integration center, and from the interneurons to the efferent neuron through these synapses. In a typical reflex arc, the following occurs. The receptor detects a stimulus. The afferent neuron transmits the sensory information to the integration center. The integration center processes the information and decides on the appropriate response. The efferent neuron carries out the motor commands from the integration center to the effector. The effector responds by carrying out the reflex action, and the response is an automatic and rapid reaction to the stimulus. The autonomic nervous system, also known as the ANS, is responsible for regulating involuntary bodily functions and maintaining homeostasis. It controls and coordinates many physiological processes without conscious effort. The ANS is divided into two main branches, the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. The ANS controls various vital functions in the body, including heart rate, blood pressure, digestion, and respiration. These functions occur automatically and are not under conscious control. Most organs and tissues in the body receive dual innervation, meaning they are influenced by both the sympathetic and parasympathetic branches of the ANS. These branches often have opposing effects on the same organ, allowing for fine-tuned regulation for physiological processes. The sympathetic branch of the ANS is often associated with the fight or flight response. It prepares the body for action during times of stress or danger. It increases heart rate, dilates airways, redirects blood flow to the muscles, and mobilizes energy resources. The parasympathetic branch is often associated with the rest and digest response. It promotes relaxation and recovery, it slows heart rate, stimulates digestion, and conserves energy. The sympathetic and parasympathetic branches use different neurotransmitters. The sympathetic system primarily uses norepinephrine, while the parasympathetic system primarily uses acetylcholine to transmit signals at synapses. In the autonomic nervous system, there are what are referred to as autonomic ganglia, clusters of nerve cell bodies. They serve as relay points for transmitting signals between the CNS and target organs. The sympathetic nervous system outflow originates from the thoracolumbar region of the spinal cord, involving preganglionic neurons in the lateral horn of thoracic and lumbar segments. The parasympathetic nervous system outflow originates from the craniosacral region of the spinal cord, which includes preganglionic neurons in cranial nerves and sacral segments of the spinal cord. The sympathetic chain, also known as the sympathetic trunk or paravertebral ganglia, is a paired structure consisting of a series of ganglia located bilaterally on either side of the vertebral column. Each ganglion contains both preganglionic and postganglionic sympathetic neurons. The preganglionic fibers enter the ganglia and synapse with postganglionic neurons at various levels within the chain. In the sympathetic nervous system, there are multiple points of synapse for preganglionic and postganglionic fibers. The primary site of synapses are found within the sympathetic chain ganglia at various levels from T1 to L2 of the spinal cord. Preganglionic sympathetic fibers, which originate in the lateral horn of the thoracic and lumbar segments of the spinal cord, exit the spinal cord and enter the sympathetic chain ganglia. These preganglionic fibers synapse with postganglionic neurons at the same level, and either ascend to higher levels or descend to lower levels before synapsing. Postganglionic fibers originating from the ganglia extend to target organs and tissues throughout the body to convey sympathetic responses. The autonomic nervous system plays a crucial role in maintaining homeostasis by regulating physiological variables such as body temperature, blood pressure, and blood glucose levels. It is also involved in various reflex actions such as the pupillary reflex and baroreceptor reflex. Dysregulation of the autonomic nervous system can lead to various health issues. For example, an overactive sympathetic nervous system can contribute to chronic stress-related conditions, while an underactive parasympathetic system may be associated with digestive problems. This has just been a very quick rundown of the peripheral nervous system. As always, I will include all of my references in the description below. Thank you very much for watching.